over to Mark chapter 15. Skipping around, but I'm going to start with verse 16. And the soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is, the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him and twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. They began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him, and they mocked him. They took off the purple robe and put on his own clothes, and they led him out to crucify him. A certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country. They forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. They offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it, and they crucified him. Verse 25, it's the third hour when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "A King of the Jews." They crucified two robbers with him, one on his right, one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you are going to destroy the temple and build it 3 days? Come down from that cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. And he saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. Let this Christ, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe. Those who crucified with him heaped insults upon him as well. At the 6th hour, darkness came over the whole land till the 9th hour, and at that 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," or something like that. Speak that language, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Verse 37, with a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus heard his cry and saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." 42. It was a preparation day, that is, the day before, my language too much. It was the preparation day, that is, the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, who himself was waiting for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Summoning the centurion, he asked if Jesus had died. And when he learned about that from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph brought some linen cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in linen, placed it in a tomb cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. Lord, we thank you for the day. We thank you for the opportunity to study your word. Guide us in all that we do and help us to understand and apply our lives. In your Son's name. Okay. Kind of in review, last week we went through several things talking about his trials. First of all, he was arrested in the garden by the temple guard. Later it's pointed out that they did reference swords, which, let me clarify, John tells the gospel writer John tells us that in addition to the temple guards, there was a detachment of Roman soldiers there, so they would have been armed that way. They were there to kind of make sure that peace was handled or whatever. Jesus goes and greets his men. Judas. I sort of write that in my notes correctly. The next person greets his mentor and Jesus and calls him Rabbi and kisses him, which is the greeting that you have toward the one that you've been following and that you're one of his disciples. We see what took place in the garden. Everybody deserts him and flees. One even takes off without his clothes. If you think there was understanding that there's more than the 11 apostles there, then most people believe it was that it was John Mark that was there and fled. If you think it was just the 11 that was there, then it was probably Peter. So it was one of the two of them more than likely. We don't know for sure. They didn't admit it, whoever it was. All right, the Jewish trial took place at Caiaphas' house. We looked at how that took place. It was done under the cover of darkness. How they first went and had Annas, the true high priest, blessed the ceremony, basically, by saying, sure, I agree, and then they went on to Caiaphas' house, where they interrogated him. His house is where the Sanhedrin would meet. It's a palace, and they would meet and do things from that particular place, because it was where the Jewish rulers ruled, so to speak, when they were not in the temple themselves. All right, so they interrogated him in an attempt to get him to self-incrimination, which was a violation of the law, as well as being a trial at night. And that failed. They got false witnesses to come before him. But even their testimony was so messed up that they couldn't even indict Jesus with it. Finally, the high priest asked Jesus himself and asked him if he was the Christ, or the King, the Son of the Blessed One, God. And Jesus said, I am. Until then, he hadn't said anything, and he never says anything to any of the other charges except acknowledging that he was, in fact, Jesus, the Son of God. Therefore, they condemned him for blasphemy and tortured him the rest of the night. At daybreak, a full Sanhedrin gathered together and pronounced guilt. Then they carried, meanwhile, we'll talk about this briefly, in the courtyard outside, Peter is denying Jesus 3 times. And it's pointed out that even after that, Luke points out that he was close enough to see Jesus that when he denied him the 3rd time, Jesus looked straight at him and he was able to realize that. So he's pretty close there. Even though he was in the courtyard and may not have heard all the things that were being said, he is definitely a witness to what was going on. Possible, and this is a note of mine, that Paul was present as a young intern to Gamaliel. We find that he was an apostle. It means he was a witness of all the things of Jesus. There's a very real possibility when you trace back how he was connected to the Sanhedrin and the things that we're going to find out about him later. There's a possibility he was there. Maybe, maybe not. But it's a thought to keep in mind there. The Roman trial took place at Herod's palace, the Praetorium. We took a look at where that was at, where he was charged with treason for inciting a riot. He said he was a troublemaker. When he was asked by Pilate, are you the king of the Jews? He admitted it. He said, it is as you say. As you said it, not me, but it is true. And so he goes and he admits to that, but none of the other charges does he even respond to. Pilate knows that he's innocent. It's made clear by Mark when he writes this that even Pilate knew he's innocent and only being charged because of envy by these leaders. But in order to keep the peace, he ordered him flogged and crucified. All right. And one thing I wanted to point out, that one of the things that we need to stress here is that Mark is trying to show Jesus' innocence in both charges. In both places where he's being indicted. He was not indicted for something that was subject to execution. He was trying to point out that he wasn't a common criminal and was executed. He's trying to say that the only reason he was executed is because he was admitted to being the Messiah, the King, and he admitted to being the Son of God. And as we started this lesson, I don't think I pointed this out last week, but as we started this study of Mark, all through it, if you recall, one of the emphasis that Mark's trying to emphasize is that Jesus, this Jesus of Nazareth, was in fact King and Son of God. In contrast, this is written primarily to the Roman church, the Roman audience, in contrast to Caesar being king and Caesar being Son of God, which was what was the practice that was going on in the Roman world then, was Caesar worship. So he's making this great contrast to show why he is really the king and why he's really the Son of God, in contrast to the Caesar that the world talks about. So here he is, even as he's being convicted. That's why he's being convicted of it, which is basically being more than what Caesar really was. All right. And the end result, Mark points out that he did not resist, he did not defend himself, but he died willingly. It was a choice. It was not because he was guilty of something and to do it. Now, let's take a few minutes to look at some stuff. Where we are. Now, this worked perfectly last week when Lloyd wasn't here, so let's see what happens today. All right. All right, here is basically the overview looking like what I told you, as if you were on Mount of Olives. I do, so you don't have to follow the arrow. Okay. All right, this is like you're up on Mount of Olives looking down. Here's the temple. And over in here is where the Last Supper took place. He comes over here to at the foot of the mountain here, which is Garden of Gethsemane. And when he's arrested, he's taken back into the town and back over here to in this area here where Caiaphas' house is, which is basically the Jewish place of rule. It's outside the temple. And then he is tried there, and we went through all that. After that, he's taken over here to Herod's palace, which is the Roman place where the Roman governor meets when he is in town here, and where he controls a place called the Praetorium. That's where all this is going to take place right here. Later on, we're going to find, as we look at this, that he's going to be taken, and actually we're not going to talk about it, but one of the other writers indicates that he was taken over here to Herod Antipas. Remember him? He's the one that executed John the Baptist. He's the one, the ruler of Galilee. The house of Antipas, or that family, had a place of, right here, a royal residence that they would come to, and then in Jerusalem too. So he would basically come here, shuttle back and forth here before he would be taken and executed. Later on, we're going to find, and I'll show you some of that, but just in an overview, there is a place right in here, which is the traditional place of the skull. However, there's an alternate site that's right where these people are standing over here. This is, at the time, this is considered the city walls right here. Even though this is an outer wall that was there, that was built more by Herod and them, but it was not the Jerusalem, the religious Jerusalem. This is where the Gentiles, pretty much, but this here was pretty much considered the holy part of the city of Jerusalem, right in here. Actually, it comes down through here.
Scott, I know we studied, but my dimensions was, what is the dimensions of the temple?
Oh, man. Substance.
Okay.
About 40 years.
Good man.
Like Rick Van Winkler. I've got it in my Bible. I can probably pull it out.
That's okay.
This part is pretty much done to the dimensions found in Exodus. This part was not. This was done in order to enlarge it, to make it look really great by Herod, because he was trying to make Herod the Great, to make this a great place here. This is also a place called Fortress Antonia. That's what this is right here. It overlooked the temple so they could keep up with the riots and stuff in the temple. You probably read about that in Acts, if I recall correctly. But anyway, so here's the proper city walls, and right out here is where the traditional execution took place. There's an alternate site for which we'll look at over here. That's over here, which is a place that's found 50 years ago, in the 40s or 50s, somewhere in there. I guess it's longer than that now. But like I'm old or something. Anyway, so all this takes place right in there. That's basically it. Now let's move on with some other things to look at. All right, here we are. We're looking back. There's Mount of Olives right up there. See those people standing on the top of the mountain? It's looking from the west. Right here is the Praetorium, and of course here's the temple. Right in here is the traditional site of the execution. These, we've looked at before, are trees. This is actually on the Mount of Olives. These trees have these thorns. Very long, very sharp. We brought them back and showed some folks. I think Ella had some, or maybe it was. Did you have? Oh, Monica had. She's the one that had it. All right. And brought them back to show exactly how long and how sharp. And they were. They're about that long and very, very sharp. Matter of fact, there's a close-up of them. You see how thick the branch is. And you see how long that is. Anyway, they were wound into a crown, as we read, and placed on his head because he was a king. And every king's got to have a crown. And that was the whole goal here. All right, once again, this is looking. Right over here is the Roman Praetorium. It would have brought him here to this traditional site. Now, if you go on the walk of whatever pilgrimage they have, where they walk the streets of Jerusalem and everything, they'll start you way over here and you'll wander around all through here. You'll never go over here. Their indication is that Jesus was tried for Pilate here, even though in my studies, I may be wrong, it says it was in the Praetorium, which is over here. But anyway. Alright, anyway, here is the location of the traditional site right here. Probably have some close-ups of that. There it is. Of course, it's the mock-up. And you notice they didn't put a cross or anything there? The Jews did this. We're not going to do anything Christian. Okay, so you won't see anything emphasize Christian here. What they did is they put together a first century model of Jerusalem when it was destroyed, when the temple was destroyed last. That's what they care about, okay? And they care about it being built back again. So that's their emphasis. But in order to, whatever, this would be a rock quarry is what it was. We'll talk about that in a second. Another picture. Here it is from the direction of the other site. The other site that's considered, there's the traditional, and you'll notice that there are several roads that go out of town over here, and that's important, as I'll point out here in a little bit. There it is again, up close. This here is the traditional. Now let me explain with the traditional location. Basically, they have uncovered what was a first century rock quarry. They can tell because everything that was destroyed fell on top of it. And so they can pull out all the rubble, and what is left is what was left. And so they have a first century, and this is it, was basically a rock quarry. What they had was, in the middle of this, first century, was a large limestone rock that's probably about 10, 15 foot high, and probably 20 foot long, just like a big chunk of limestone in the middle of this quarry that was contaminated. So you don't put good limestone into your building and stuff, it'll crack and fall apart. So it was integral, had other sands and different things integral into it, so basically it's considered waste. So they cleaned out the good stuff all around it. At the same time, when they did a quarry like that, they also would excavate and make tombs to the side, where they would excavate out of the sides of the hills and stuff like that, and would end up making it a graveyard. So they did this. And so when they talk about this being Golgotha, place of the skull, they're making reference to the fact that it is a place where executions take place. One of the things John, or somebody points out, is that it was on a main road. And this is a main entrance coming in from the west side of town that people would have traveled on. Romans did not execute people in a hidden valley. They put it up prominent and center. So here is a quarry with a big old hill for people that basically is a high podium for somebody to see. You know, I've always envisioned in the movies this giant mountain, and up on top of the mountain are 3 crosses, you know. That isn't there at all. If anything, it'll be more like this. And so here it is, an elevated place where they basically had chipped out a hole, dropped the cross in, literally in this limestone rock, and it would be basically this elevated platform that's big enough to put 3 crosses in there, 20 or 30 feet, just enough to put in there. And basically it's the same thing as putting them up on, like you would do a hanging, you put them up on a scaffold, in essence. All right. So after all this, traditional says it was in this location, they excavated, they found this, they've been building churches there for years. As a matter of fact, the Greek Orthodox and the Catholics, and I don't know who all, there's 2 or 3 of them that have a rotation. They got so many hours, they pass it to the next because all of them want to be in charge. So they have this thing that they have built a church basically over it, or of some kind, and a place to visit. This here is looking in it at the rock, and you can see the crack in it. One of the things that happened was the tombs split open and the earthquake and everything. They're indicating that it is similar to this. Maybe even this happened. You'll see some of the irregularities, not the reflection of the glass, but some of the stuff in there that's not pure limestone. You know, we got limestone all around us on the hills and stuff, so we got a good idea here what that's like. All right, here's another view of what it. Yeah. This is a side view of that same big rock that they have basically encapsulated. And then this is the top that they have put this monument church over it, and they put this spot right on it that they said this is where he was executed. Did he happen to die there? I doubt it. I don't know, but I doubt it. We would know that. Well, the emphasis in the church by God was that he died, not the places and all those things, because he was not interested in making these mosques, these monuments, I should say, religious things to come do pilgrimages there. He wants us to remember this event when? Every Sunday. Do in remembrance of me. He just said it in the upper room. Remember that? So it's not about that. But, all right. This here is what the temple looked like during the time of Herod, or time of Jesus' death, 1st century, before it's destroyed in AD 70. And I point that out because it was here that the curtain of the temple was torn in two. All right? Which curtain was it? That's what we've been told. The reality is I can't find that it specifies one way or another. It says the temple. Could have been. And the lesson for that, if it was, is basically there was no more holy place. There was none of those. The other would be as if was the outer one, that entrance to it, basically saying that there is no more, God is no longer here anyway. Both of them say the same thing.
Those were bronze doors, though, weren't they?
Well,
Leading to it?
they had doors, but they also had a temple veil that went over it at the time. That's what the Jews and archaeology said was there. I don't know. Anyway, the point was, it was ripped in two, and the main lesson we get from that is, it is no longer the temple of God. No longer important. He would no longer be there. Okay? Jesus was gone. He was the final sacrifice. There would be no more sacrifice in this place for sins. And in addition to that, Judaism as a whole was basically gone. All right. This here is the place that they say was the place where Jesus' body was laid. We've got this here, and we've got this little church thing over it. You go in, and pretty rough on you when you go in there, but they don't want you to do anything. That picture of the snuff, one of those without a flash because they don't want any pictures taken. Anyway, that's for your information. The next one is, as we pointed out, as you come out this way, right over here, is the one that they call the Garden Tomb. In that location, about the 40s, I think it was, they found a place that looked like a skull. Okay? Today it doesn't look that way because this limestone is deteriorated significantly. Which brings to my next question. It deteriorated that fast in the last 50, however many years. And what about the last 2,000? Anyway, because of that, they also happen to have found near there what is a garden tomb. This was actually a 1st century wine press and garden that was there. That dates back to there, the wine press. And this tomb here is a tomb that was there, dates back to the 1st century as well. Either one of these are probably correct. Anyway, but you can see basically it was a hollowed out place inside of a rock wall. Rock side of a hill. They built this above it. Actually, there's a road that goes above this up here. And this is what it would look like on the inside. Basically, it would be hewn out, place bodies up to the side, and we saw how when they deteriorate, they put them in boxes and move farther back. Anyway, that's what it would look like. This here, that's for? That's right. That's where you put your stone and you roll it. Which look like that. Okay? All right. All that said,
It would have to be wealthy to have somebody go out and do something like that, a rock that size.
yeah. Yes, you would. And as we read,
Scott, the author of the lesson in the book, refers to the veil ripping.
yeah,
He referred to the outer because that would be the one that most people would see.
that's right.
And if it was to enter one, it would only be a few, high
It's
priests.
secret to the high priest and a few of them, and that's why some people believe it was the outer that was referenced. I have not found a reference that it was one or the other. You know, the writer says there isn't. I don't know if he's right or wrong. I know I haven't found it. Okay? So with that in mind, I'm just throwing it out there. It could be the inner or the outer. The basis for the belief that it was the outer is that most people would know that it took place. Whereas the other would have been a secret. It would have been kept by the chief priest and them, at least for a while, because they wouldn't want to be advertising that in the first place. Of course, as we'll find out, there's a couple folks that were on the inner Sanhedrin that knew about things that were not exactly jumping up and down and having executed anyway. All right, so let's go back to the text and look at it. All right, first of all, the Roman soldiers took him inside the Praetorium. Praetorium, as we mentioned, would have been right over in this area right here. This is modern day. This is the temple, the garden tomb, the holy sepulchre is where he would have died. The traditional side is here. The alternate side is here. Where it says King David's tomb is right next to where the upper room is supposedly. And then right here is Caiaphas' house. You will find right in here, actually right in here is where the Praetorium was on this location. All right, so they take him inside the palace, the Praetorium. Mark goes ahead and clarifies it. Praetorium, which is basically the place where the ruling governor resided at the time. Okay, when he was in place, it was called the Praetorium. It's kind of like Air Force One's not Air Force One unless what? It's the president's in the plane. Well, the same way with the Praetorium. It was when he was not there and he was over on the Mediterranean coast, the Praetorium was there. It was basically his place. Matter of fact, I think I read somewhere that it was really the general's tent. Literally is what it started off being, and that's where the general gave orders from. So that's what you would find here. All right, so they took him into the Praetorium where he was flogged. As a severe beating with many stripes with glass and rock and any kind of things they put into it. He was dressed up as a king, and Mark emphasizes this. Why? Because he was a king. So they dressed him up like a king, and put those crown of thorns on him. They laughed at him and they mocked him as being some kind of king, the king of these Jews. Of course, they were Romans, so they laughed at it like, what kind of king does these Jews have? So they mocked him and ridiculed him, and then they led him out to be crucified. So as they led him out of here to be crucified, he was either led over into here, or he could still have been led here. One of the things that was pointed out is it had to be on the main road. This other location was on a main road over here too. So either one of them could have served that same purpose. So they led him out to be crucified, and it says they took him to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. A guy named Simon and his sons were with him. They were coming in for the festival, for the feast. And so they were present for that, and he was from Cyrene. Where's Cyrene? Modern day Libya. Is Libya still there? I know they had a whole bunch of turnover and all kinds of stuff, but Libya.
North Africa.
Do what?
North Africa.
North Africa. So he's from North Africa. Him and his two sons are there, and he's pressed into service in order to carry this cross. What's interesting when Mark writes this is he writes that a certain man, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by. Why would he mention that? Do what? They were followers of Jesus. He's writing to this Roman church, and he's writing to them, and when he does, he says, the father of these two guys you know. That's what we would basically say. So the implication is the readers would know who they are. As a matter of fact, in Romans chapter 15 or 16, at the end, 16 I guess, because 16 is the end, we find Paul sending greetings to the church at Rome, and one of the people he sends it from is a guy named Rufus. There's only two Rufuses in there. Are they the same? Maybe, maybe not. But it seems to be the implication is that Rufus and his brother Alexander were known to the readers. They were followers of Jesus after this incident. And they were known in the church, whatever for it. So therefore Rufus was there, and he's probably the church of Rome at some time or other, just like Mark was, Peter was, and actually Paul was. Luke was. There were others that were there over a different period of time. All right. So he was forced to take help with the cross. While he was there, the passerby, those who went by on the road as they were coming into town, they may have been a passenger, but if they were, somebody was carrying them because they didn't have a car. They could have been in a carriage of some kind, but anyway. So they came by and they insulted him, hurled insults at him, and they had heard about this. Oh yeah, he's going to tear the temple down in 3 days, but he can't even save himself. So they're sitting here saying that, and the Bible says that the chief priests and teachers of the law were talking amongst themselves, and they were saying basically the same thing. This guy says he's, and I tried to read it the way that they might have been thinking it, which I'm discussing. It's like, he says he's our king. He says he's our Messiah. He can't save himself, let alone anybody else. How is this going to work, And that's the attitude that they're having as they're having this conversation when Jesus is being crucified. They finally eliminated what they thought was a threat that was not really going to be the Messiah, the Son of God, Son of David, Son of God. All right. So they're sitting there saying, he saved others, but he can't save himself. Now that's important to know because its emphasis is he saved others. All through the book of Mark, Mark has pointed out that he saved people from disease, death, every kind of thing, and now he can't save himself. If you're a reader and you know all those other things, what do you think? Why, sure he can. Why isn't he? Begs the question. Okay, these guys say he can't save himself, but I know I've seen him saved, so he should be able to do this. So it brings the question up that they know he has the power and everything, but he doesn't do it. And that's going to be important as a Christian. Why would he not? Looking back, why? We know the answer, and the answer is?
He did it for the same reason he didn't turn the stone to bread.
Yeah. Or he did it, same reason he let him find him guilty in the first place. Because that's what the plan was from God. There was more to it than what these guys were doing. And so because of that, looking back, we can see that. And so that's one thing Mark is trying to make it so that they can see that even those guys down there knew that he had done all these other things. But then they're sitting back when he's not saving himself, saying he can't do it, and everybody else is going, sure. So we find that this took place at the third hour of the day, which is what time?
9 o'clock.
9 a.m. All right, they had insulted him and all these things, and then darkness came upon the land about noon, 6th hour until the 9th hour. So from 6 o'clock to 3 o'clock, it was dark throughout the land. And after at the 9th hour, Jesus says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? What's he saying?
I think it's quoting this scripture and song, and I agree with Willie on that. I never thought about it. Going back to that, I think he was calling that to their remembrance.
I agree 100%. That's what I've always thought after I got past the fact that he's in agony on the cross, and I got back and he starts quoting scripture, Psalms, which incidentally is quoted. I was reading somewhere that it's one of the most quoted scriptures in the entire Bible by other folks. We find it quoted in several different other places. It's a quote that goes back to Psalms chapter 22, and this quote, it's David writing this psalm. David is being pursued and harassed and to the point of death. He doesn't understand. He's already been made anointed to be what? King. He knows he's been anointed by God. Has Jesus been anointed? Yes. He knows he's been anointed by God, but he's being persecuted in such a way to the point that he's about to die. And so he starts off, God, where are you? What's going on? But as you read the 22nd Psalm, one of the most interesting things about it is, David never calls for vengeance on him. He does that in another one, but not in this one. In this one, he tells, where are you, God? What's going on? And he talks about it and the persecution that he goes through. And then he starts coming around to a point where he starts talking about victory. And how God's going to win the battle for him and all these things. And how he's going to bring his enemies to their knees and all that. So Psalms 22 starts off at one place, the misery that he's in, and brings him to where he's victorious. I believe Jesus quoted this for the same exact reason that David did. He was in misery going through. He was anointed to be king. He knew who he was going to be. The Christ, the eternal king. All those things have been prophesied. He knew all these, but he was going through all this persecution on his way to a point when he would be victorious and God would bring him victory. And he would rule on his throne. David ruled on the throne. He was the one that was given credit for ruling, establishing that kingdom completely and ruling on that throne and making the physical Israel what it was. Jesus would do the exact same thing in the spiritual sense. When he would come and rule on his throne, he would take it on into eternity as the spiritual and eternal and final king. All right, so I believe that's what he was trying to say. So it's a psalm of agony and triumph, victory. Then it says, with a loud cry, Jesus died, gave up the ghost. Does anybody know what the loud cry was? John records it. It's the only one that records it. It is finished. John says that he said, it is finished, and he died. So it had to be that same thing. We find at the same time the centurion standing there. He's the one that Rome has sent to carry out this execution. He's standing there making sure the job is done. He sees this cry, it is finished. And it says that because of what he said and what circumstances took around it, he said, surely he must be the Son of God. All right, so now Mark is telling his readers that the centurion who executed him is even saying, there was more to it than just an execution. He's up here saying, it's finished. Which is talking about his mission. It's done now. It's finished. And then all this darkness and all the graves opened and guess where the graves were? Right over there. Nearby. All these things and the earthquake and all these things. And he says, surely it must be the Son of God. So now Mark has a testimony from the centurion standing there watching him die, saying, based on the events that took place here and the fact that he died early, he must be the Son of God. Which is something that you wouldn't find a Roman centurion saying, who's very callous to this event, because that's something that they take care of every day. All right, so he dies, and then it says the day was the day before the Sabbath. So the Sabbath begins at what time? 6. So at 9 o'clock, this other takes place, or shortly thereafter. So they got 3 hours to take his body and move it. We find that Joseph of Arimathea, which is a town in north of there, who was one of the Sanhedrin. John tells us he was a secret member, secret follower of Christ. Not everybody in the Sanhedrin thought Jesus was guilty. And Nicodemus, another one who came in by night, another secret follower who was a member of the Sanhedrin, probably. The two of them took him and they buried him in a tomb. And one that belonged to Joseph. And they put him in there in one of those two places, or some other place. They put him in this tomb that belonged to Joseph himself. And after they put him in the tomb, they rolled a stone in front of it. And Mark tells us that Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, who obviously were well known to the readers of this, witnessed him being placed in the grave. That'll be important. Next week we'll talk about the resurrection. When we talk about the resurrection, it's going to be important that they didn't just go to somebody else's tomb and say, oh, it's empty. you have people that Mark is saying, these people that you, these women that you know, heard of, testified that they saw Joseph and then he was placed in the. All right, any questions, anything?